Hey, welcome back to 65 Drums. My name's Justin. Today we're going to be talking about the Tama True Touch. The Tama True Touch. It's a practice drum set. This is one of those practice drum sets that shares a lot of commonalities with electronic drums. It's got a mesh head on the snare. The toms kind of remind me of the Yamaha DTX silicone pads, but it's definitely not electronic. Now, when I first saw the announcement of this product online, I kind of had this initial thought that it was kind of stupid, but when I actually sat down and played it in real life, it won me over because it's actually probably the best practice drum set I've ever played. When it comes to drummers, there's definitely a group of people that want to play acoustic, but they can't. But they don't really want to play electronic because maybe they don't like rubber cymbals or whatever their reasoning is. So a practice drum set is like this sort of compromise in between those two things. Alright, so here are the sizes of the components. You got a 6-inch kick drum, the snare is 10 inches across, the toms are 8, 8.5, and 9 inches across. The only hardware that comes included is the stand that holds the tom pads. It seems to be like a modified cymbal stand with one of the legs being a little bit shorter than the other two. This is so that you can get this drum set a little bit closer to a wall if space is at a premium. And then on top of the stand, you have all these different arms with clamps that hold on to the tom pads. Unfortunately, the cymbals, the cymbal stands, and also even the snare stand are not included in this package. The cymbals that I'm using on this set are the Zildjian L80s. Now the cool thing about this drum set is that pretty much every single pad is unique in some way. Now starting off with the construction of the snare drum, it doesn't have the rebound of a regular mesh head because there's a foam donut underneath of it. This absorbs a lot of the impact, it keeps the rebound level a little bit more realistic, and gives it a satisfying feel. Now in the middle of that foam donut, you've got what appears to be like 100 ball bearings that give a snapping sound while you're playing on this. It actually reminds me of something I used to do as a kid. I had one of those Fisher-Price snare drums that I feel like a lot of us had growing up. It didn't quite sound like a snare drum because there was no snare wire on the bottom though. So as a kid, what I would do is find a big tin of marbles. I would put the snare drum on top of that tin of marbles, and now when I played on top of that as a kid, it would make a snapping sound sort of kind of like an acoustic snare drum. This Tama practice kit is basically doing the adult version of that where it's designed into the pad itself. I also like the construction of the rubber rim around the snare. It's just the right construction to give it a satisfying feel when you're doing rim shots. Now moving over to the tom pads, they have a completely different construction. You cannot play as fast on this as you can on the snare drum pad, which is great because you can't play as fast on a floor tom as you can on an acoustic snare drum, so that makes sense. It's got kind of like a pillowy consistency to it. Now at first, I thought that playing material must have gone down really far because of how large the shells are, but after looking underneath of the pads, it turns out most of that is just like plastic empty housing, and it's all for looks. Something cool about these toms is that they're all pitched differently. As you go from the top snare to the bottom snare, they go down in pitch. Now moving over to the kick drum, I liked it. It had a bit of a softer feel to it, kind of sort of like the toms. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Roland KD10 pads on the TD17 line, and with the playing surface being 6 inches across, that's definitely enough room for double pedals. Now the cymbals I was using with this drum set are the Zildjian L80s. These are like the OG low volume cymbal line from any company. I think Zildjian pioneered this. It originally came out on the Gen 16 line, until they realized that no one wanted to pay all that extra money for a cymbal module and those sensors that went under the bell zones. So they made the L80 line as a cheaper alternative that had a bit of a darker sound to it and were slightly quieter. I really like these cymbals. Now they do have some sort of like flex to them because there's less material there. They aren't as heavy, they won't have that sort of weight as they sway on the stands, but it does feel more realistic than rubber cymbals. Now if you want to, there's a slightly cheaper alternative from Sabian called the Sabian Quiet-Tone line. They're much brighter sounding, so some people will prefer the darker, more understated sound of Zildjian, and other people will want the more bright and shimmery sound of the Sabian Quiet-Tones. And of course, you can always just buy individual components separately and mix and match. Maybe you want to have like a brighter ride cymbal, so you buy the Quiet-Tone one, but maybe you want to have like a darker set of hi-hats, so you buy the Zildjian ones. And if you're really worried about the budget, you can always buy some of these cheaper Chinese brands. You can buy a whole set of them off Amazon for around 75 bucks. They probably sound like trash, but they're a lot cheaper. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, as far as the stuff I don't like about this, I really don't have any major complaints. Maybe they could have had some rims on the tom zones. Maybe it would be nice if they included a snare drum stand in the box, because it apparently doesn't come included. But of course, in the grand scheme of things, those are basically nitpicky complaints. The quality of everything is very good, it feels nice to play on, and I can trust it. My real issue with recommending this, I do recommend it if you need a practice drum set. It's basically the best there is, in my opinion. But my real issue is that the price basically doubles when you add in all the other necessary components to get this up and running. So the base version of the drum set is $500 to $600 depending on how many toms you want. You know, $500, that really doesn't sound that bad for a practice drum set of this quality and this feel. The problem is, if you try to replicate what I played with the Zildjian L80s and all the stands and everything, that's going to be roughly $1,200. More on top of that if you want to buy the kick drum pedal and the drum throne too. But I do want to mention that I did some digging and I found a way to get the price tag down to like $700. Now, of course, keep in mind this is really cheap components. The hardware, it may or may not be held together with paper clips, I don't know. And the cymbals probably don't sound that amazing. So the question is, who exactly is this drum set for? In my opinion, I think this drum set could be a good option for people that don't really like electronic drums for whatever reason. They just want to get a nice feeling and nice sounding practice drum set that they can put next to their acoustic drums and then fold up in a moment and put in a closet somewhere. So far, this is my favorite practice drum set that I can recommend to people. There are cheaper options like this one. It's like, I don't know, $200 or $300, but it's a lot simpler. It won't feel as satisfying to play on in the long run. This is a nice practice drum set for people that want to get something that's portable, that's well made, and feels nice to play on. And that's my 2 cents about the Tama True Touch practice kit. I had to say that a few times in order to not get my tongue twisted. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day. See you in a few.